So I think what really matters more is the companies that are really good at adapting quickly. One great case of this was the New York Times. Finally, though, they were able to make that turnaround, that rebound. Once they realized it wasn't enough to just try lots of new technology, they actually had to work differently. AI is not your strategy, right? ChatGPT is not a strategy, right? This is a tool that will be useful for some of your strategies or some problems you're solving, not for others. It's not just Japanese companies. American companies too, as I said, are having the same problem. I do think things like generative AI are shifting some of those expectations. So that's sort of one way I would think about this, is you really have to understand, okay, how are our changing standards and expectations, understand all the new digital tools, but then you really need to know your business and then be ready to try and combine and match what data, what tools, what processes are going to best solve that particular challenge for you.
Hello everyone. Today I'm pleased to introduce Professor David L. Rogers from Columbia Business School. He's a global expert in digital transformation and author of two key books, the Digital Transformation Playbook and his latest, Digital Transformation Roadmap. I'm Yasuhiro Yamai of NTT Data Institute of Management Consulting, joined by Yurika Tajima, a consultant at this institute. We host a Digital Transformation Institute, which is DXI, and we invite Professor Rogers as a leading lecturer to this session. And yesterday we had a very great discussion, both practical and academic and theoretical, with 8 corporate companies in Japan. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Professor Rogers. Welcome back to Tokyo. And thank you very much for a great discussion yesterday.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I loved the program, the discussion yesterday. Again, the chance to meet with so many important Japanese companies who you brought together for the Institute, and happy to be here talking with you today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really would like to convey that, the atmosphere and great insight. And today I'd like to deliver it to you today. Last year, Professor Rogers had a dialogue with Mr. Yamaguchi, our institute's president, about how his new book, Digital Transformation Roadmap, is going. Let me briefly share the key points as a revisiting. The book tackles a major issue. 70% of digital transformations fail. It offers a practical guidance on how to lead, grow, and assess digital transformation efforts even while they are still in progress. A key insight: transformation is not a one-time project. It's an ongoing journey. The book presents a 5-step roadmap. Vision: define why we need to change and set a shared direction. Priorities: focus on the most important customer and business problems. Experimentation: learn quickly through testing and validation. Governance: create flexible management systems to support innovation. Capabilities: build lasting strengths in technology, talent, and culture. Professor Rogers showed that transformation is possible for any company, regardless of size, type, or country, including Japan. These ideas are very relevant for Japanese businesses. Today, we will explore how digital transformation has evolved over the past year, since last year, and what that means going forward. Now let's begin the dialogue. And first question from my side, very broad question.
Good.
What are the major changes in global DX progress and business? What are the characteristics of companies that have made progress in DX over the year? What went wrong? And any rebound or any key trend in the discussion with key executives in the US or Africa or Europe or Japan?
Well, let me start with the first question. What sets apart the companies that I see making real progress in their digital transformation? I would start with 2 things. One is they have a really clear focus on the business and the customer and identifying a few really important problems that they want to solve. So they really are thinking about where do they focus their efforts, because a lot of digital transformation projects can become just that, a list of projects, and you're building this and installing IT there and testing this software. And so these companies really have that kind of strategic focus. And then the second thing I would say is that these companies are really good at learning and adapting quickly. You're never going to know at the start how some new tool is going to work in your company and whether it's going to solve a particular problem or whether your initial idea for a new digital product or service or tool is going to be adopted, whether it's by a customer, a consumer, by your own employees, right? Lots of companies will spend a lot of money for some new data analytics solution, and in theory, or looking at the presentation, it's very well made, technology, but it doesn't actually work within the context, and so their own employees are not using it. So money wasted on a very good product. So I think what really matters more is the companies that are really good at adapting quickly, testing, learning, is this the right solution? What do we need to fix? Do we want to change course? Understanding the customer's needs and so forth, and having that very sort of agile mindset.
Thank you very much. That quite resonates with the discussion yesterday, especially on the point of focus.
Yeah.
And many Japanese corporates say we are good at visions and priorities,
Yeah.
and we have a problem in the governance, which
Yeah.
is how to make a decision. And you mentioned in the lecture that if you have a focus on the burning platform,
Yeah.
that will be solved, and that was a key insight for me yesterday.
Yeah, and that was something, it was really good to get into that discussion with the companies there. What were they having more trouble with? And in fact, as you said, many of them are starting to really define some important strategic vision and priorities, but they found more difficulty with what I call governance. So how are decisions made? How do we set up specific teams within our companies to really do this kind of rapid experimentation? And that involves, approvals, it's budgeting, it's a lot of sort of process. And if you don't have those set up properly, then even a team that has a great sort of strategic problem to solve, they find they move slowly. And we have to get better at moving quickly, even though we're big companies and old companies and big, large organizations. Those companies can move much faster, and that's really, I think, the key. You asked what was wrong with the ones who are not.
Yes.
That's one of the things that's wrong. I think the companies that are not making any progress, they're still just proceeding with their old operating sort of ways of working, and so everything has to go up to approval for someone above and someone above. There's a long kind of planning process. Resources are constrained by slow annual budgeting processes. So that's one big factor. Another big factor is what is so critical here is really companies who are too focused on the technology. What I call they're falling in love with the solution. And so they say, well, this year it's all about AI. They say, we need an AI strategy, or we want AI projects, and they just start from the technology rather than starting from the business. And those are, I think, the two kind of biggest problems I see right now with companies who really want to have care about digital transformation, but are not really seeing the progress or the business impact that they want.
Yeah, thank you. That translates to the step 2 priority. And how to translate technology into customer needs and problems, or company needs and problems, as you said. And that also translates into the governance issues. And Japan has a very unique challenge. People say we are in the lifetime employment.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to hire digital talent and so forth. And do you find any uniqueness or similar challenge in the yesterday discussion?
Well, there are some differences on the talent. I think there's certainly a history and sort of norm is more expected in American companies that you hire people and you let people go, and you don't expect. We had a norm of lifetime tenure maybe 50, 60 years ago, right? That sort of, we left that behind a long time. I think it's changing though in Japan. I think it is changing now. But I think for companies in countries like Japan, where still there's less turnover of employees, you really need a talent strategy that combines how do we retrain the employees we have to take on new digital skills and new roles and to work in different ways, as well as how do we hire the right talent that we want, and also how do we look at talent as outside the borders. So that's the borders of the country, right? Of course, you want to look at talent solutions from a global point of view, but also outside the company. It doesn't all have to be your own employees. It's also about finding the right way to partner with other companies outside that are going to have certain skill sets, but managing that partnership really well, not just sort of saying, solve this problem for me or go build me this digital solution, but really actually working together very collaboratively. I think that's the key. And if you can do those, you discover that the barriers, you may say, it's harder for our company to just hire a bunch of digital experts very fast. That doesn't have to be the biggest barrier. Right? You can work through that.
Thank you very much. Any cases of rebound, like once started, but gain traction to some part, but rebound? Any?
Sure, rebound companies that sort of struggle with their digital transformation and then get better. I think it's very important. I actually start the book, the new book, the roadmap book, with a case study of a rebound, if you will, because I think it's important for us to not be discouraged when we see the survey data that says, as you mentioned, 70% of digital transformation efforts are failing, meaning the company is trying and they're spending money and people, and they're not seeing the impact. They're not seeing the business outcome that they expected, right? But that doesn't mean there's no hope, right? So I start the book with the case, one great case of this was the New York Times. So very traditional. I know Japanese executives say, our companies are very old and have a lot of tradition. Well, the New York Times had a lot of tradition, very old company, especially for an American company. They're now almost 200 years old. Very sort of proud of its history and its ways of working. And so this is a company that really struggled with digital transformation, right? Early on, they just thought it was add some technology. They said, there's the internet. Well, we'll have a website. We'll have a email, version of the New York Times. But all they did was just add a little technology to the old business. They didn't rethink anything about how could news be different? How could journalism and media and so forth be different with the opportunities of the internet? They really wanted to stay to their old ways of working. And so for years, they were trying to transform and they were so frustrated. And the real problem was the business, the revenue, as customer behaviors changed and how we read and watch and so forth, the revenue of the New York Times kept going down every year. Finally, though, they were able to make that turnaround, that rebound. Once they realized it wasn't enough to just try lots of new technology, they actually had to work differently. They had to work much more collaboratively. They had to work in small teams that would combine technology and reporters. They had to look for whole new digital experiences for their customers. And critically, they had to be willing to try a lot of things and discover which ones would work. One of their biggest successes has been podcasting. Totally different. They never had any audio in the first 170 years of the company. So it's a very different, not something they would normally do. And they're honest. They said, we didn't know that would work. That was just one of several things we were trying. And all of a sudden, our audience just really started growing. And we said, okay, we have to focus more on this strategy. So I think it's a great example, and there are others that I've seen, that if a company learns to focus on the right principles of digital transformation, even if they have been stalled out, as you put it, they can get momentum and start to drive real change.
Yeah, I see. As an avid reader of New York Times for the last 10 years, it's amazing that they still continue to improve user experience and its contents. There are many animations, great podcasts, and it's improving. So that's the spirit of your book.
You can tell that this is a company where now the expectation is we are going to keep pushing ourselves and finding new ways to grow the business, because it's never standing still.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we'd like to move on to the next topic, which is about the generative AI. So as you mentioned, so we have seen tremendous progress of generative AI these days, especially over the past 2 years. Some experts say that the fifth industrial revolution has already begun because of the generative AI. So the question is that how should we perceive generative AI, especially in business scene, like an ordinary technology or a trigger for an industrial revolution?
So this is an interesting question. I see a lot of people asking right now, and it's a good thing to think about, is kind of what scale of a change are we looking at, potentially, from artificial intelligence? The first thing I'll say, if we want to consider that, is we have to be aware that AI is not one thing, and AI did not start, 2 years ago. There's been work, there's been research into AI for many decades, but really as a big impact on business, it started about 13 years ago. So in 2012, there was a big breakthrough. There had been a lot of theories of what is called machine learning. And that was even just one theory of how to build a sort of a simulated, I would say, a simulated intelligence. It's not really intelligent, but we have this word AI. But that was when, in 2012, we had the first technology that could really do machine learning well. It's called an artificial neural network. And the first breakthrough was machine vision. So computers could look at an image and actually see, the first great test, Google had this, it could see a cat. So you could show pictures from the internet to the machine learning algorithm, and it could tell you which one has a cat in it. So that was a huge technical breakthrough, which sounds sort of silly, but actually was very important for business, because with machine vision, we get all sorts of things. We get facial recognition. We get autonomous vehicles and drones, right? You can't have a vehicle move on its own unless it has a very sophisticated machine vision system that can see what's happening around it. And interestingly, with just some small changes to those neural networks, as we call them, you could not just look at visual information and identify what's happening, but it could also read legal texts and spot, information. For example, in legal discovery, you could do a lot of different things. You could predict maintenance needs in, aircraft engines. So we saw a lot of application, but notice it was very industrial. A lot of it was sort of inside complex business needs. Predictive models started to appear. So suddenly we could predict our supply chain much better and know in advance that we needed to move certain products here and there. Right? So a lot of powerful AI. And then, of course, 2.5 years ago, we had this latest wave of AI, which is a kind of neural network, but a very interesting new kind called a transformer model. And that created large language models is what we all use the most of, things like ChatGPT, but also the text to image models where we can create a picture or a video that's never been seen before. Now the difference there is these became consumer products. So all of a sudden, it wasn't just IT specialists in a supply chain. It was your kids and yourself and your parents. We're all on their phones saying, oh my gosh, I asked ChatGPT to tell me a bedtime story, and it gave me a story or something. And so there's much more awareness of it. It's very important technology. I don't think we know yet, honestly. To the question, is this an industrial revolution? Is this going to be, to make an analogy, is this as important as the smartphone? Is it as important as the internet? Is it as important as fire? Or human language, the invention of writing maybe, right? So I don't think we know. I'm not convinced, but it depends on how we ask the question. I think LLMs, so the actual newest technology has been very overhyped. as if it is going to transform, it's going to become smarter than humans by tomorrow and take over the world and we're going to be its servant. And I don't think there's any evidence for that. I do think it's a very important technology. I think certain industries it's going to impact much more than others. It's already changed the productivity of software coding greatly. I think there's going to be other sectors that it transforms our productivity very fast, very fast, and a 5x improvement in human productivity. And I think there are other industries and other jobs where we're going to use it, but it's going to be like a 10% improvement. It's like, oh, I use that now and that helps me with one part of my job. Every day I used to do these 5 things and now one of them I can do super fast. Okay, but you still have a lot of other parts of your job. So for a lot of us, it may be that. It's okay. I think the challenge is how do we as businesses not fall in love with the technology and instead think about that application, right? Okay, how do we make the best use of this in all the many different things that we do in our own business?
So as you mentioned, we should not fall in love with the technology itself, but you mentioned in the DX roadmap, the vision, the North Star impact. So we should set the North Star impact first, and then how to adapt the how to use the technology generative AI or so. That is the what you're thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I call this framework. I developed the digital transformation roadmap. But as you are both made clear in the introduction, it's not a technology roadmap. It's really a roadmap for transforming the organization. So exactly right. We are starting with that North Star. What is our vision of where we want our company to go? We are a legacy railroad business in Japan. We are an industrial manufacturer or trading partner. We are a bank or a financial services group, right? Where do we see our industry and the needs of our customers changing? And what's our vision of our strategy, where we want to be heading, right? The future role we want to have, what's the role our business is going to play in Japanese society 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. That will help you define some specific problems to try to solve. And then you think about the technology. Then absolutely, as you get that strategic clarity, each of those problems you should be asking, well, is generative AI helpful here? Is older predictive AI machine learning models, maybe that's helpful, right? If you're trying to improve your supply chain, don't use ChatGPT, right? That's not the right tool. But you could have a great machine learning model of another kind that could be very helpful there. So try different tools in service of the strategy. And I am sure you will find many places where this new kind of AI is helpful, and you'll find other problems that are better solved with a different tool.
Thank you. So the next one, what impact will the diffusion rate of AI have on companies?
I think it's going to vary a lot. So as I said, it depends on the industry. So I think if you are, for example, if you are a software development company, either you actually provide that as a service to other businesses, or just you're a company that has a digital product, so most of your staff that's their work, is writing code and constantly updating it and so forth. You may find those companies are seeing big changes in terms of staffing and productivity, and it's not that they're firing their employees. Typically what they're saying is we're hiring fewer, we're focusing less on hiring in more people, and we're focusing on how do we change the way those people work to really capture these productivity gains. And then maybe we can actually drive a lot of growth of the company without having to hire more people. If you're in professional services, there are some big changes, right? There may be some services you used to provide. Definitely already seeing this from companies I talk with. Services they used to provide and charge other companies for, the companies now say, you used to give me this strategic analysis of my industry, right? It was a lovely PowerPoint, very smart, lots of information in it. ChatGPT just did that for me, right? Or maybe Google Deep Research, right? One of the more sophisticated tools. It took half an hour and cost me, what, $20. You used to charge me $20,000.
No way.
So certain industries are going to see big change. Other industries, it's not going to be as rapid. I was talking with a group of banks recently, and they wanted me to help them think about how to get competitive advantage through this latest set of AI tools. And I said, I wouldn't assume that's going to happen. I think that's an industry where you have to adopt the new tools. I don't know that one bank is going to race ahead of all the other banks because it somehow has better AI. I said, looking at their history, I said, think of it as ATMs, right? Automated teller machines. When they first arrived, that was a breakthrough technology for the banking sector, right? But it's not like one bank adopted ATMs and then they won. Every bank did. And if you didn't implement ATMs, you were going to lose. So it becomes like a requirement to stay in the industry, in some cases, rather than a source of competitive advantage. It becomes just part of how the industry continues to evolve. So I think many industries, it's going to look more like that. But there are definitely some, like I said, where it's going to have a big disruptive impact just in the next 24 months, I think, even.
Thank you. So next. So in relation to that, we want to talk about the impact on DX of the proliferation of generative AI. So what impact does the widespread adoption of generative AI have on digital transformation? I feel like everyone does not want to leave behind on this trend, generative AI. So, but one of the core ideas of your book is that we should repeat the experimentation, right? The process of experimentation. So, but in my view, there is a high tendency that Japanese people avoid failure or taking risks. So, although Japanese people understand intellectually that the experimentation is a crucial factor in validating the business hypothesis, but I believe that for many Japanese people, conducting experiments still feels like a high hurdle for them. So in such a cultural context, how will generative AI impact DX roadmap, from the perspective of development and execution?
Well, I guess I would say the first thing I'm observing is there is an opportunity here. So as I said, AI is not your strategy, right? ChatGPT is not a strategy, right? This is a tool that will be useful for some of your strategies or some problems you're solving and not for others. However, it is true that because this technology has come forward so quickly and is continuing to develop very quickly, right, that it's creating a lot of momentum and willingness to try something new. And I think that's a good thing. So I think we should take advantage of that and say, look, let's use the interest or the urgency or even the fear, we have to do something with AI or we're going to be left behind. Use that to get people to try new things, right? Maybe get out of their comfort zone, be willing to experiment. I think the key is, and this is not just a Japanese thing, I see this in the US. Companies are doing lots of pilot projects with AI, proof of concept, POC, and they're getting frustrated because they do a bunch of these projects and then none of them scale up, right? And so they said, well, okay, we spent a year and we built 12 AI pilots and it's had no real impact on the company in terms of business impact. So I think you use that as the urgency and the reason why companies have to be willing to work a little differently, as I would say. So which means to adopt the kind of process of experimentation which I lay out in the book, which cannot stop just at the POC. It has to start with problem definition and then validation with the customer. Who really has this problem? what is the problem you're solving for, the customer need, and that might even be just someone inside your business, right? It might be an employee's challenge you're trying to help with this AI. Validate what the problem is, develop those early proof of concepts, see how they do and don't work, but you have to keep iterating. You can't just say, well, we had a plan, we tried it, we're done, right? You have to understand if you try it and it only sort of works for the customer or for the employee, then you've got to change it. And you keep iterating. It's not that different from, you know, the Kaizen kind of principle or mindset in Japanese business that we're used to applying to our core operations, right? Apply the same thinking to something new. How do we make it a little better, solve it a little better, take out the waste, find what's the friction point, why is the user confused by the AI or doesn't know how to use the output or something like that, until it gets better. And then when you find it's working successfully, then you have to be ready to then put in the resources to scale it up and start to apply it in many more people and maybe train more people in the organization on it. And as you said, that can be uncomfortable or unfamiliar for some companies. It's not just Japanese companies. American companies too, as I said, are having the same problem. But I think this is an opportunity for us to say, let's push ourselves past the way we are used to sort of building technology or deploying it in our companies and try this more continuous improvement, continuous experimentation process. And then when we find out of maybe 12 POCs, the 2 that really work best, then say, okay, now we're going to commit to actually try to roll those out very quickly and see maybe we can see a big impact on the business.
I'm relieved to hear that even the US companies are struggling with AI POC. And as we look more broadly, technology progress proceeds in 3 steps. Like method is complete, and already generative AI could be at that stage. And next is adoption. You can find a great use case which can transform and build into the economic impact. Then diffusion. And the society is ready to accept, and we will change our behavior and so forth. And currently, we are in the adoption stage.
Well, I think it depends. I think for businesses, we are almost entirely in the adoption stage. There are certain consumer applications. Use ChatGPT to do my homework, right? That was adopted very quickly and is diffused through every school children. All schools, you know? So there are actually some consumer applications where people have figured out, oh, I know how to do this, I like to do this. People are using it as a new form of search. And like it, and that becomes a habit. So the movement from adoption to diffusion depends on the use case. And I think, I would say right now, on the consumer side, we have some applications that have moved very quickly to diffusion. Business, almost entirely still struggling with adoption. Again, as I said, software developers is an exception. They have really figured out how to use this, and now it's in the diffusion stage. And I think we'll start to see some other business applications too move through, but you're right, most of them are still held back at the adoption stage right now.
I see. So that's where the vision, priority, and experimentation comes in, because in the adoption stage, experimentation is very, very critical.
Yes.
Maybe new innovation in business could come from consumers, like Generation Z or even the teenagers. Now. So,
and I think it's common that with new technologies in business, often it is the younger employees. They don't have the full knowledge of your business, so they're not maybe going to create the most value for you, but they can point you the way. Pay attention to those new employees you hired who are 20 years old, right? How are they using generative AI in their jobs? And they may not, again, they're not senior, they're not making a big impact on the company yet, but they may figure out the application first. Because they're curious, they don't know the old way of working, they're spending time with the new tools, and they can help point you in the right direction. And then you can say, as more experienced people in the company, oh, okay, if we did what you're doing here and just your personal job as part of this, major process in the company, risk assessment for an insurance business or whatever, a major business process, then you see, oh, this can actually really create an impact. So look to those young people for ideas.
Yes, I'll do so.
They'll push you.
Do so. Yeah, I'll do so. Thank you.
Yeah.
We want to move on to the next topic, changes in consumer values. So I believe that understanding consumer needs is one of the most important factors for companies to survive in an increasingly competitive environment. So in your view, how do changes in consumer values impact digital transformation?
Sure. So I agree absolutely. One of our key jobs in any digital transformation effort is, figuring out what customers are essential to our business. Hopefully we already know that. But really understanding how are their needs changing, how are their expectations changing, right? That's another way of asking the question. Because sometimes the customer has seen you a certain way and liked you as a business for years, but now another experience they've had has changed their expectation, right? This was something I heard a lot, 10 years ago, was companies who said, our customers always thought we had good customer service until they started using Amazon. And they said, we're not a retail company. We are, a doctor's office, right? Mm-hmm. And no one ever complained how hard it was to book an appointment and change your appointment or do things like that. And now they all say, why are you so slow and unhelpful, and I wish you were like Amazon, right? So expectations are changing. I do think things like generative AI are shifting some of those expectations. So that's sort of one way I would think about this, is you really have to understand, okay, how are our changing standards and expectations that we have as consumers in our whole life, how is that impacting your particular business, right? How do they think about the experience you create for the customer? I also saw this, industrial, trading and buying. People would say, oh, well, we thought the paper catalog was great. Our customers always liked the paper catalog. And all of a sudden they said, why can't I digitally customize all my options for this, piece of equipment I'm buying from you, just like I can on, some other app. There's also an element to which I think technology also sort of shapes culture, right? Not just the culture or the customer expectations changes what we need to do with our products. And I am interested in that, what's happening right now. It's interesting. Some of it is concerning. I think, to me, there's some of the impact of social media, for example, over the last 15 years has clearly been negative on social well-being, anxiety, depression, things like that. It's not just a guess. We have a lot of medical research and scientific research data now to show there's a real connection, right, between these things. When I look at these new tools, right, the chat bots with generative AI, on the one hand, I think it's exciting that I think there's reason to be optimistic that this can help things like education, right? That you can have a tutor, a personal AI tutor who helps you think through, doesn't do your homework for you, but challenges you to help think better and deeper and do a better job, right? You may have an AI therapist, right? Could be very helpful for a lot of people, right? Those are applications where large language models seem to do very well. But another thing they're very good at is being your friend. They're very good at being your best friend, your boyfriend or your girlfriend. For someone my age, that sounds crazy. But for people who are, younger than my son, people who are teenagers, they say, oh yeah, every night I chat with my AI. It's like my best pal and we have a great conversation. And I think my concern, so potential cultural impact here is reducing human interaction, right? And something like that may make you happy in the moment. You have a very nice conversation, you feel good, and maybe have some interesting ideas about what you want to do tomorrow and so forth. But it's also, there's a potential that it makes us more and more comfortable. We used to go out to watch the movies in a social setting at the cinema. Now me too, we sit at home and we watch our streaming services. And yeah, because it's great. You have a lot of choice and you pick the time, and it is great, but it does mean we spend less time with other people. And I think I'm interested in if these newest technologies accelerate that trend, and if we spend more and more time having some positive experiences, but very sort of like we're in a cocoon, like we're us and our technology, it's all we need, right? We don't need any other people. Personally, I'm concerned about that, but I also think it's just for business and thinking about the future, could be a very important trend that may affect a lot of industries, and that we should be aware of and thinking about that kind of interplay between culture and technology.
Okay, for the last question, we'd like you to share your thoughts on the impact of business environment to DX. So how is trade and macroeconomics changes affecting DX? And what is the difference of DX impact between US and Japanese companies from the perspective of national circumstances? So today is July 2nd, so just before the Trump tariff deadline, right?
Yes.
So many Japanese media outlets are reporting every move and the comments he makes.
Yeah.
So I'm sure global companies are closely monitoring the situation. So the point, trade is very crucial for us.
Yeah, and obviously I can offer no prediction of what is happening, this week with U.S.-Japanese trade policy. But I do think it's an important issue. Obviously, we have sort of national level, trade and tariff policies that kind of cut across the whole economy, whatever, certainly any industry where you have significant trade with, other countries, or in this case with the United States, which is, most industries. I think when we think about DX, when we think about digital transformation, this always has to be part of our context that we are looking at. So when you are looking at how do I pick my priorities, how do I think about problems to solve? Again, I find many companies just focus too much on the technology. They start with the technology and they end with the technology. When you focus on the business, and I ask companies, I say, before we talk about technology, what are the biggest trends that could have, may have the biggest change on your company's future in the next 5 years? And all of a sudden of course, generative AI is one, but it's no longer the only thing they're talking about. And they do say, well, actually, trade and tariffs could have a really big impact on us. They'll start talking about their workforce. They'll say, actually, one of our biggest challenges is our aging workforce. So we have very skilled employees, but they're all approaching the end of their career, the most skilled employees, and they're about to retire. We're going to lose a lot of knowledge that's trapped inside people's heads, or we're having trouble hiring people, that side of labor. So there's many different factors. I was talking with a construction company, major Japanese construction company, and they're involved in lots of businesses. Some of them, of course, are impacted by demographics, right? If the population is aging, home construction there's less demand for, right? Other construction you may be growing. So that shifts their strategy. So this kind of thinking about questions of tariffs and trade and workforce is all what we need to start with, because it turns out actually you may find a digital solution that helps you with the aging workforce. There may be a digital solution that can help reduce your, how much of your sales are impacted by, a given tariff regime or something like that. There may be digital solutions that impact how you can expand your labor pool, because certain jobs that used to need to be on site, on location, don't have to be. And so, well, that workforce doesn't have to be in Japan, right? So before we think about our digital strategies, we really need to take this holistic view of the business, and absolutely sort of trade and macroeconomics are a big part of that. Yeah.
Like not only the like technology itself, but also like the other factors outside of the company should like be like considered to like make a good strategy for them, right?
Absolutely, and that's really what digital transformation is about. It's about understanding what are the factors that are most critical to the growth and the future of your company, and then using the right technologies in service of that, right? Because we have these amazing tools, right? And they keep getting better and we keep getting more of them. But if you have a piece of wood that you need to cut into two pieces, you don't use a hammer. A hammer is a great tool, but it's the wrong job. So it's not just don't get excited by the tool, understand all the new digital tools, but then you really need to know your business and then be ready to try and combine and match what data, what tools, what processes are going to best solve that particular challenge for you.
Yeah, one aspect might be the cross-border talent flow.
Yeah.
And it's might be being restricted and not good for the globally. But Japan is in a very unique position. So actually, University of Tokyo says that they are ready to accept non-US students in Harvard to study. I'm not sure whether they will come or not. Do you see any chance for Japanese companies as a country under these macroeconomic changes, like attracting more talent, or we are in a very unique position?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think every country, there's a common concern in a lot of countries right now about restricting the flow of people. And there are a lot of complicated reasons why. But I think from a business point of view and from a growing your economy point of view, you want to distinguish between simple numbers of people crossing a border and talent. What's the talent we need? How do we grow it? How do we cultivate it? So I think every country should be thinking about its talent strategy. And I think Japan absolutely, given its business strength, but given its aging population, it's incredibly important to have a strategy for how do we keep bringing in the right talent we want to keep growing the Japanese economy. I know that is changing, right? There are more foreign workers coming into Japan today than a generation ago. Thinking about who the talent is, how do we make it easier? There is a language barrier. The US has we talk about benefits of the US dollar. One of the great sort of economic strengths of the US as an economy is language, right? Because English has become the lingua franca of business. So it is easier to attract talent to the US because really highly educated talent around the world, most of them have some knowledge of English already. And so it's not a barrier. They say, okay, I come to the US, my English will improve, but I have enough to start. Whereas if you're a super talented software programmer in Hungary and you get a call from Tokyo University to, your acceptance to Harvard was rejected or something, or just, a business in Japan that wants to hire you, you may think, oh, this is a great opportunity. Oh, but I don't know any Japanese. And, so I think that's an important issue. And, that should be part of it too. How do we, whether that's creating free classes to train people, maybe it's digital tools. Everyone who lands in Japan gets an earpiece that automatically translates with AI, Japanese into English. Maybe it's investments in, anyway, teaching more, supporting the learning of Japanese business people to learn more other languages. But, I think those are the kinds of factors. We want to think about how do we attract the digital talent? How do we keep bringing in, not just today, but 5 years, 10 years from now, how do we keep growing the talent from the whole world that our particular economy or country needs to thrive? I think every country should be thinking about that.
Thank you very much. Very encouraging comment, but still challenging. But we will do so as an entity group.
Right.
Thank you very much for great insight shared here, and truly looking forward to seeing you next year.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. I really enjoyed working with the team and with all of the companies you brought together for the Institute, and looking forward to our next step together.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.